Hello from wherever you are, and welcome to Let's Play Games. I'm John McFarland, Adult Services Librarian for National Public Libraries, and I hope you'll join me in learning or rediscovering some of the more common and uncommon games out there. This time we're going to go into one of the most complex, well-documented, and well-thought-out games, chess. I'm going to take you through step by step and take this most imposing game down to its basic pieces. Let's get stuck in. Welcome in. This time, because chess is such a complex game, I called for backup. So I want to welcome Phil Krakowiak. He's one of the other adult services librarians at the Madison branch. Thank you for coming in today.
You're welcome. It's a big treat to be here on the Gamekeepers environment. Happy to be here.
And we're in a little bit more wide open of a space this time, but we are going to start in with this game in the most simple way we can. The board and the pieces. You'll probably notice that the board looks a little different than you're probably used to with these letters and numbers. Phil, explain to me these letters and numbers.
Okay, this is algebraic notation. It's really useful in chess to pinpoint exactly where the pieces are. You've got letters A through H on the back. The board always starts with the light-colored square to your right. It's the same for my opponent here. And we've got 8 files as the pieces move forward, and those are numbered. So, for example, this type of move would just simply be E4. The pawn moved to E4. A long time ago when I learned chess, that notation was a little different. This would be PK4. That's a letter number difference, king's pawn 4. It's a descriptive notation. This is very clean, easy to use for both players, easy to understand, and it's widely adapted for tournaments and chess computer games and everything else. So that's that.
And this is why for this series, I came with a notepad because I'm going to be able to show you how we notate so that way we can go through when I make many mistakes. So let's go ahead and clear these pieces off of the board here real quick so that way we can go through and make it a little easier to view. So first off in this 7 or 2 is going to be these pawn pieces, all 8 of them in a row. Typically, they can only move one direction, forward, straight. The specialty is when another piece is on the board to its diagonal. This is the only way that a pawn can capture a piece, this being the major object of the game. So it will move here, you take the piece off the board, that knight would be captured. Yeah. Also, an important part of this game is the promotion. If Phil can get one of his pawns to this 8th rank, or I can get one of my pawns onto the 1st rank, you get the opportunity to promote the piece into whatever piece, minus a king, that you want. Typically, this is done through a queen. More often than not, people choose a queen. There are some exceptions to this. But it will be, like Phil has set up, all 8 in a nice, neat little row. The next piece I'm going to talk about, we're going to go from the outside in. This is the rook. The castle piece is what it's sometimes referred to as, and it's special in that it can move any distance it wants, north, south, east, and west. So as long as it's not running into a piece, it can't jump over a piece, but it can go anywhere along these files.
Right, and one thing to maybe mention is the value of pieces as we're going along.
Yes.
Certain pieces have a little more value. Obviously, you've got 8 pawns, so it won't kill you to lose a pawn here or there, but the pawns support other pieces, and they can be really useful later in the game, as John said, with the possibility of promoting a pawn. That's an awesome thing to happen in chess, so keep that in mind. But Pieces have an assigned value, but I wouldn't get too keyed up on that. But pawns are generally referred to as like a 1, worth 1. The rook, 5.
And we will get to the value of pieces later as we get into some more of the strategy. So now we've got the rooks here. Next is going to be our knight piece. This is going to be on these B and G files. And they're a little bit of a specialty mover. They're one of the only pieces, the only piece, that can actually jump over pieces because of its specialty move. It can move in a straight direction 2 pieces and then must move to its left or right. So this G right here moves forward 2, and then it must move to either this H6 or this F6. Another example is being out here. It can also move this direction, so it can move 2 to the side, 2 to the side. So any sort of L shape like you would have in a Tetris you can make.
Right, L shape. And also, it's always moving to the opposite color square. So it started on a dark square, it can only move to a lighter square. That might help you remember that. I've had beginners and they're puzzled. They get into the game and they forget. Oh, where can my knight move? Well, it's on white. It can only move to a darker square. It's on a darker square. It can only move to a lighter square. So that's one way to remember. And like John said, an L shape. Yes.
So if you want to move it back to F3 for a second. So this is also the only way that pieces can be captured is by hitting on that exact square. So going around doesn't do anything in particular. So I could move from its E5 here to that F3 to capture that knight. Next, we've got our bishop. Bishop can also move any direction it wants diagonally. So northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. So if, for example, move this here a second. If that was open, you could capture that rook piece. This is one of the big values of the bishop and why it's one of the also more important pieces on the board. But,
Diagonals. The bishops control the diagonals and they stay on their own color, basically. Later in the game, you can have a bishop tucked away in the corner, and it's real easy to just overlook that. I find that's a mistake people make. They forget the bishop is hanging back. So
all the time.
yeah,
and that is actually one of the, when we get to checkmates, which we will cover, having 2 bishops covering a directional can trap a piece in and leave you with nothing to do. But just to show the example of what he was talking about, so here, everything from H8 through A1 is technically now protected. So if you get to, let me move this out of the way for the moment. This entire space could all be protected, so it's a very valuable piece to have. So now we have our 2 most important pieces in the game. The queen. The queen used to not be as powerful a piece, but I'll talk about that more in a bit. It can move up, down, left, right, diagonal, in any direction it wants. As many pieces forward as it wants. This is why the queen is one of the most valuable pieces. And also, I'm sure you'd love to explain the queen on her color rule.
Yeah, well, it's clear when you set up the board the right way. The light-colored queen is always on the light-colored square. The dark-colored queen is on the dark-colored square. So it's also easy to make that mistake. It's, oh, that's right. No, the queen is on its own color when you start. It can change, like John said, it can move all over the place. You only have 1 queen. It's the most valuable piece next to your king. So you don't want to lose the queen early.
The last one is our king. So it can move omnidirectionally, but it can only move 1 square. So anything in this 9 area is at risk, but also we talked about valuation of pieces. The king is worth infinite value in this context. Because once you have that, the game is, well, over. So, from here, now we have the board set up. But let's take a step back. That was a lot to throw. And let's go into a little bit about the history of this game. So, chess is a Western European adaptation of the Shatranka. I want to talk about the other direction it went because it doesn't always spread just from one direction to another. In China, Shatranka became Shangqi, which was Chinese chess, and became similar to a lot of the other games of the period where they played on the actual borders rather than in squares themselves. They also added further diagonals to increase the cross-representation of play. The king was replaced by general, and also a cannon piece was added to reflect what was readily available within Chinese technology around the time. So we always seem to talk about how the game developed in one direction, but I wanted to make sure that Shangqi was mentioned because it is one of the most popular games in modern China. Welcome back. So now that we've gone through the initial piece setup, we're going to go through a little bit of some of the rules of etiquette, which are important to have in this game because it's just some bad habits to avoid. But we're also going to go through really quick and show you the object of the game, which is to inevitably checkmate. There are no more valid moves for the king to make. So, Phil, explain to me probably one of the most important parts in how we decide who has white and who has black.
Traditionally, what we do is we take a pawn in each hand here and put them behind the back, and we mix them up a little bit, and we offer it to the opponent, and they choose which hand, basically, they want.
So yeah, I'm left-handed, so we'll go with the left hand.
Well, you stay black. So I get to start. This takes me back many years when I learned chess from my grandfather way back in the 70s, I believe, when I was about 9. He taught me the fundamentals. As a young kid, I was jumpy as most kids. I just thought I could learn everything quick and I know everything. But he was a veteran player, and he told me how to play, and that kind of stuck with me over the years. Everybody comes into chess a little differently these days. Some have never played over a board with another opponent. They play on a computer, which is fine. There's so many variations and so many good things about online chess, where they're just on their phone playing. But if they come to a chess club or they just play casually with somebody, they really should observe a few common sense rules. Now, we're in this beautiful room. It reminds me of like Reykjavik, 1972, Fischer versus Spassky. It's like a primo setup, but regardless of where you are, you can still kind of do the right things. You should be a good sport.
No flipping of tables.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's a board game. You want a good battle with your opponent, but you don't want to distract them. You don't want to be talking to other people while you're playing. Generally, you want to play within a certain time frame. There are time games. We have a chess clock here, kind of a retro analog clock.
So put that like right in the middle there.
Yeah. So most of the time, you're not using a clock. So you basically want to make your move within reason, within a couple minutes, maybe. The two biggest things I always remembered were, once you touch a piece, you have to move that piece. You don't do this and no. How about that? No. Think before you move. So once you touch a piece, you have to move it. Once you release your hand, the move is complete. That was always. That's just fundamental, common.
So there.
Yeah.
So how do you have, if you're learning the game, it's kind of agreed upon, how much do you vocalize how much your move thought is going into it? Especially if you're trying to teach somebody the game.
If you're trying to teach somebody the game, they may have no idea what they're doing. They may just be moving pieces without really thinking through. So you can always offer a little advice like, well, your second move will probably have to protect the pawn. You just moved out. He's attacking you. So you want to think through what's happening. Look at the whole board. We're just starting. So I'll do that. And you can see I protected the pawn. John's consulting his notes.
So typically, I'm always still learning what are called opening moves, which we'll get to next episode. But for me, this is telling me some of the moves that are being done. I can kind of think about what general plan of attack is. So I moved this knight here. So that way I could put this e4 at risk, but also cover this d5.
Right, and I might have not done that. Maybe I could have just decided to push a pawn up and attack him right off the bat. That would be a little unorthodox, but that might work.
So, and if that happens, now I have to consider what I want to do next. So instead of trying to do this, do maybe that.
Okay. So.
And then from there, you're going to start making some of those moves. And if you were playing with the time clock, typically you'll notice that it has a little button here that you can depress.
Right. So let's say we agreed that our entire game will be 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
There's complexities now where it's 30 minutes plus a certain number of seconds for each move you made. These older clocks don't do that. You just simply set it on, let's see, 30 minutes till it hits the little red indicator there and the flag would drop and you would lose on time if you let it do that. But the buttons control, so John, make a move.
Okay, it's actually your move.
It is my move? Okay.
Yeah, G6.
All right, so basically you have to hit your clock, or his, let me see, we're gonna start the clock for me, and my time is ticking, so I could be thinking, maybe I'll do this. Basically, you're gonna, it's your move now, so your time is ticking.
Right, and so now that another move's been made, I'm constantly thinking about what other moves that I could make. And I don't want to risk this one yet, so I think I'll do that one. And then I will...
Yeah, actually, we're not doing this right, but...
Nope.
We'll have to just...
Yes.
Yeah.
We're doing it backwards.
We're doing it backwards. So you're setting your opponent's time going after you make your move. So now we're doing it right. So you can see it's ticking. It's on my time. So I could sit here and ponder complexities here and think while I'm losing time. But I don't like to get too keyed up on that. Classical chess could be the slowest. There's many variations of speed chess, but we're not even going to use the clock here, but that is the basic of a chess clock. You've got simultaneous, you've got buttons here, and you're starting your opponent's time. So my time is running.
And while he's contemplating moves, I'm also contemplating what I'm going to do.
Right.
For example, if I've memorized an opening, in particular, I'm going to want to see how well that opening works against certain moves. There's certain openings that are in contrast and in complete contest with. Pop the...
Okay, let's stop the mind clock. Now his time is running.
And because that move was being contemplated, this is one of the only exceptions to that king, which we will get to very shortly.
Yeah, that was castling. We castled early.
But that's the right move, I'll do that.
Okay.
And then you want to make sure these easily depress if you have one, so you won't need to do anything. A lot of the digital clocks will have a little flapper on it, so that way you've got a little bit of, so you gotta,
Right. Most modern digital clocks look like that, and younger players are so used to hitting them quickly. And somebody donated this to our chess club in Madison. I kind of like it. It has a little retro vibe to it.
so one of the things that I'm doing here is, as he's making moves, I'm trying to protect my pieces while at the same time make some moves of my own. You go ahead and depress there. And then, let's see, I think it's just easier to do this myself. And you can do it when we get to the castling. You can do it either direction, but we will get to the complexity of that here soon.
Okay.
But notice this is part when you see some of the initial trends or plans with what Phil's doing and what I'm doing, creating that middle space that's open so those pieces can freely move. Because if you have your pieces too jammed in, it's going to create some significant problems.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So we moved that bishop before I wanted to. But hey, we can move through it. And I'll do that. And some of these moves are not going to be the best moves intentionally. So when you see a particularly bad move, please call it out.
Yeah, we're just demonstrating some early piece development here.
So let's make a blundery style move. We'll kind of do that. So on my end, since I know that that queen can move all the way through, yes, there are two pieces blocking, but if I can get those two pieces out of the way, the king will be what's called in check.
Mm-hmm.
So that won't be the end of the game, but that will be the risk of the end of a game.
Mm-hmm.
But that is probably not the best move to make, because now, if I lose that queen, I'm in a world of hurt. But I think I'm going to be able to at least make a move here because I don't think, aside from, yeah. So this will be where I leap over, and I'm getting greedy because I want to go for, notice I could capture that queen. But why don't you explain what the problem with that is? The problem with me moving there.
You want me to explain?
Yeah.
Well, you're attacking one piece, and that's obvious to me. So I could simply, move the queen out of danger and attack you. So it's an okay move. There's nothing wrong with getting a piece down on the opponent's side pretty quickly. So I
But I'm also ignoring that knight on the e4.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing with chess. There's a lot of simultaneous planning and plotting and trying to determine what exactly the opponent's trying to work on. And there's a lot of counterplay. That's the fun part of chess. And there's also something called tempo, when you have a chance to advance your game basically, and the opponent's kind of backtracking, you got the edge now, and they have to react. So I have to react to this one, and I think I will just do that for now.
Okay.
So now what do you have to do, John, with that?
Well, so I can't. I'm going.
Do you want to lose your knight?
Yeah, it's a question whether I want to lose my knight, and I could consider that piece dead and sacrificed, or I could try and make another move that would be potentially better or worse. But take a step back while we're going through this. This is kind of the end of the early part of the game, and we're now into what would be the middle game now that some of the pieces are what's called developed. I've got a little bit more of the history of chess. Come back in a minute. We've got a lot of history to cover of chess, and I'm going to take it in pieces over the course of the next 4 episodes. First, we have to go all the way back to antiquity. And chess is one of the building blocks of a lot of board games out there. That off-colored board is really a basis for traditional board games as we know it. But it started in ancient India, known as chaturanga, which in the Indian Sanskrit basically means 4 pieces, 4 limbs. And it represented, this was a very military kind of game where it represented infantry, cavalry, chariotry, and elephantry. So, as you probably guessed, bishops didn't really exist in ancient India, so they were represented by elephants. And the queen wasn't the queen, it was Fairs, or the counselor. And the queen actually was rather nerfed for the longest time because the counselor piece could only move forward and diagonal, sort of like a combination between a knight and a bishop. And the elephant was the most powerful piece on the board. It could move just about any direction it wanted, similar to how we have the queen. So that was the initial basis for the game. How did it keep developing? More on that in a moment. Welcome back. So let's do kind of a reset of where we're at right now. That knight is kind of way afar afield and is probably at risk of being captured here very soon. I'm out of position a little bit because notice some of my pieces are just hemmed in, whereas there's a nice, we'll get to what's called pawn structure, where at this point it's really hard for me to break through. So the next move I think I'm going to do is this.
Okay.
So I am putting at risk, knowing that that piece is probably going to be captured, and realistically can probably be captured at any time. I'm at least going to try and do an exchange where I can get at least one of his pieces, namely that knight right there. Because remember, they can only capture diagonally.
Well, let's go with a check. I'm calling check just to let you know.
Oh, yes, you are. So here is where we're at. Right now, this piece can move forward here and putting me at risk. Now, an important thing, explain stalemate real quick.
Stalemate comes way later when you only have a few pieces, let's say a king and a couple pawns, and your pawns may be blocked. It basically results in a draw if you're unable to move your king without putting yourself in check. That's an important concept. You can't put yourself in check. Even if that's the only move you can make, it's not a legal move. If it results in you being put in check, that's a draw. The game is lost, and that can be very disappointing if you have way more pieces you were working toward a checkmate, and suddenly your opponent manages a draw. He gets a draw off of you because you forgot to observe that he didn't give his king a little bit of leeway there to move around at least.
Right.
So that's a draw.
And so at this point, I can't make any other move aside from dealing with this knight in one form or fashion.
Right.
Which I'm kind of limited in what I can do because this space is out of bounds. I could also capture with the rook, but notice this pawn here can immediately capture, which means I lose that piece. Or this bishop, but then I lose the bishop in the next turn for sure.
But you think it through, and you can get an exchange, like you said. So
right.
What's better, moving your king out of danger or exchanging a couple pieces? We talked a little bit about piece value. A bishop and a knight are roughly the same. 3 points, depends what you like better maybe at this point, which you don't want to lose.
Right, and depending on what your game plan is, sometimes a piece can be really important to your plan. If that bishop's really important to the way that I want to end the game, I don't want to lose that if I can help it. But what I'm going to do is going to take that exchange, which now places me out of check, and when you capture a piece, you'll keep it on your side, and you'll just put it off to the side. So that way you can effectively see and get your pieces back once the game is over.
Okay, well, that's a quick exchange. And actually, look, you're up a pawn if you decide to.
Right, so at this point, I can move my rook here up, and then from there, I at least have gotten out of a little bit of danger, but also in general, I can take that piece realistically whenever I want. So I would have at least a little bit of a better move set that I could now do. So I could ignore that for the meantime if I wanted to, which I kind of do. But now it's a question of what to do next. So let's play a little aggressive here. Trying to get more, if you get control of the center, which is kind of these 4 and subsequent 16 squares, you're usually doing pretty well. So right here, I've got a little bit of control of the center, but Phil has more developed pieces. So the ones that can make better moves than just moving straight forward or
This is sort of I guess I would call it a gambit.
So define for me what a gambit is.
Well, you're giving up a piece, but you might want them to take the piece to help you out positionally, or maybe you've got something else in mind that you're working on. So it's a gamble essentially.
I'm presuming you want me to take it tonight.
Okay, well, you fell for it basically. You took your hand off the piece, so you lost your queen.
Yep.
Take that back if you want to.
Well, I want to take it because I still have this rook here.
Okay.
So where I will at least do this queen exchange.
Okay. All right. maybe that was a blunder on my part. I'm not sure, but
But it's also a force where
yeah.
now either we do this queen exchange or I get to take his queen unless he moves it with no penalty.
Mhm.
So
I'm gonna try something else, though.
yeah, go ahead. With the taking it back, you can always, upon agreement, especially in a casual game, let somebody take back a blunder,
Right.
especially if you're trying to do something in particular.
Mhm.
Now my pieces are in real danger. Because now we're talking about the notion of losing at least one, if not multiple pieces on the get-go.
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
Just about anything is going to worsen my position. So, in the interest of not running out of time, and I know that we're going to have to go, I'm going to do another bigger style blunder. So we'll go ahead and do this.
whoa.
That is, especially within chess notation, if you do a bad move, sometimes they'll write out with question marks. Or in that case, that would be probably a double question mark. Why did you do that?
It might be a question mark with an exclamation point after it. That's like, did he really make that move?
Yes.
Didn't he see that?
Which I did, but at this point,
you ended up saving well, that was a blunder. That was a
intentionally so.
mistake, but yeah,
Yes.
you did it on purpose.
So, but that is where looking at the pieces is so important. And from this position, it is considered a good idea when you know that you're probably going to lose to just agree to resign. This usually means you can stop the game and reset, and also usually talk about the game with your friend or whoever you're playing with, and you can talk about it. Obviously, me and Phil have actually never played before, but because we know each other, this is something where we know we can talk about it and converse about it. So, and at that point, if you want to stop the clock, you just kind of even it out, and I'll stop the clock.
Yeah, so resigning is like he said, it's a way out without getting checkmated. I'm not saying I would checkmate him immediately, but I do have a little bit of an advantage here, piece-wise, now with the extra pawn and the queen, as opposed to a knight. So I probably would be able to work out an end game that would be in my favor. So traditionally, they would just say, I resign. They might even knock over their king, offer a handshake. It's like, that's fine. It's like, good game, yeah.
Yep.
And then it's fun to discuss. It's like, wow, I didn't understand your opening move, or didn't you see that fork, or, Even the top grandmasters like to do that. They like to, after the game is analyzed, but when they're still talking, they're like, oh, yeah, you had me on time. I was in trouble there once you got the rook over. But this was kind of a wide open game with a lot of captures. My king was stuck on the back rank here, and it would have been a huge mistake for me to just get checkmated by his queen, coming down. It's so, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I did think about it. I was trying to give myself an out at some point, but I was also trying not to lose
That rook.
So
Yeah.
you had a possibility of, you made some aggressive pushes late, and they worked pretty well, but then you kind of stuck yourself with that queen.
This is the way it
fork.
goes.
Yeah.
But that is definitely all the time we have. So we will touch back next week after short explanation of things. A little bit more about the development of this game. It moved from ancient India to ancient Persia, somewhere around the 6th century, and became known as shatranj to reflect the language change. But also the pieces were slightly different. In Persian, Shah is the head of a state similar to a king, so it became the Shah. Fairs stayed the same. And the chariot, notice that castles also didn't exist in the 6th century in that form, so they were still known by their chariot form. And they were known as the Rukh, R-U-K-H. Sound familiar to Rook? Because that's where it came from. But that was, for the longest time, that initial evolution of the game. So more on how the game continued changing in just a moment. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Next time, we're gonna go to a second level of this game. We're gonna go into openings and how you can set up your pieces in order to have an advantageous strategy. Does this look confusing? Don't worry, we'll get to it next time.